Welcome back. Welcome back to Laughing Dragons Modern 20K. This is the MPX headliner event running today and tomorrow. My name is Brad Rutherford. I am a local judge who happens to know the event owner, and with me today is Reed Duke, one of the best players ever. How you doing, Reed?
Good, thanks. That's a very kind introduction, Brad, and pleasure to be here with you. I think we're gonna have some fun.
I think so too. We're about to pick up on a four-color mirror match. It's the modern four-color mirror. It's been reinvigorated with the new Nissa. What do you think of this deck?
Well, this is one that I really had my eye on going into the event because for me, like the Omnath strategy, this is like the most customizable. This is where the answers are, but it's tricky, right? It's difficult deck to play, difficult deck to build. So my question going into this event is going to be like, can there be a really skilled player who really hits the metagame just right? Has those couple of key sideboard slots for Urzatron and the tough matchups, and is able to get a big edge over the competition. So two players with two actually significantly different builds of Omnath facing off in the 3-0 bracket. That's fascinating to me.
What's the primary difference between these two deck lists?
So we have them displayed as four-color Karn and, well, for now deck B, but just four color Omnath is fine for that one. But one player, well, actually both players have Delighted Halfling, but one player focused more on Karn, and the other player focused a little bit more on creatures like Nissa, Fury, Solitude, Elish Norn. Both players very centered around the One Ring, which you would expect maybe will wind up being a point in favor of Karn, because first of all you have increased access to the One Ring. Second of all, you shut off your opponent's activated abilities of their artifacts. But yeah, I'm just excited to see, like, these matchups are tricky to play. Depends on the opening sequences. Can somebody run away with a Delighted Halfling kind of draw? Um, but yeah, there's a lot of moving pieces here.
All right. Well, let's over to the match. Looks like they're finishing up their pre games, but do you think Preordain's going to play into any of this? Is it a
Yeah,
deck?
great point, Brad. I see now that one player, Matt, who also happens to be the Karn player, has 4 copies of Preordain, whereas Curtis has chosen to omit Preordain and just go more on, I'm going to curve out with creatures and planeswalkers, the more traditional
Mm-hmm.
path for these Omnath decks.
Perfect. All right. Starting off, that is Windswept Heath. First Blood. Matt Shu on four-color Karn. Finishes up a stopping ground. And there it is, Delighted Halfling, Lord of the Rings All-Star. What do you think of this card?
Very powerful. Um, there's a few things that are very powerful about it. The most subtle and yet possibly the most important is the second point of toughness, because many of the mana dorks, the mana accelerants in modern, like, just match up so poorly against stuff like Orcish Bowmasters and Ren and Six, but Delighted Halfling is an exception to that. Additionally, the color fixing is really powerful when so many of the best cards in the format are legendary. And then, of course, uncounterability is huge as well.
Yep, and we've got a mirror match, Stomping Ground and Delighted Halfling for our other player here. Uh, is the die roll going to be a deciding factor here?
I think you can expect that to be the case, especially if these halflings are going unanswered. There are removal spells. People have Prismatic Ending, Lightning Bolt, whatever it might be, but it's kind of tricky to answer a turn 1 halfling because you have to A, have the removal spell, and B, have the appropriate untapped land in order to do it. And so far, so good for Matt, getting to cleanly untap with the halfling and deploy Red and Six. Now let's see if he's able to play yet another spell to press this advantage. And yeah, it looks like he's gonna announce a lightning bolt on the opposing halfling to make sure that Curtis cannot match him in terms of mana.
Yeah, here's where that play draw rule comes into effect, like we just talked about. That red in 6, real good here. The our other player here is looking to Fury red in 6 off the battlefield by exiling a second copy of Fury. Both players with 4 out of 5 domain. Back to Matt for his third turn, and it's the One Ring.
Yeah, uncontested One Ring, really impressive here. And what I really like about the One Ring in this deck is like the cards you draw off of it are so powerful. So first of all, you have tons of life gain in the form of stuff like Solitude, so you can not worry too much about the accumulating life loss of the burden counters. You also have tons of free spells and additional mana in the form of Omnath's triggered ability. So you really just get to fire on all cylinders when you're drawing 2, 3, 4 extra cards off of the One Ring with each turn that passes.
Matt still capitalizing on that, going first with a halfling here with Omnath and a fetch land. That's Misty Rainforest. He's clicked up his One Ring a couple of times. That he's just going to bury Curtis in card advantage here. Boy, those Innistrad lands are difficult to parse out. That's an island.
Yeah. So yeah, a couple of ways we can expect these games to play out, Brad. A lot of times it's going to be a real slog with tons of card advantage, triggered abilities, trading off. Other times it's going to be like that. Like I had an unanswered Delighted Halfling. I totally ran away with things, and we have an opponent conceding on the 4th turn of the game.
Yeah, that was rough for Curtis. Matt basically did everything he wanted to do and was uncontested. We're going to go to sideboarding, but the players have very different sideboards given that one has Karn. What do you think is going to manifest here?
Yeah, for sure. So that is one of the costs of having Karn. The benefit, of course, is that you get to access all these sweet one-ofs in game 1 in your main deck, but it comes at the cost of having less real estate to actually spend on sideboard cards that you're going to bring in. But the thing that I really have my eye on is like, what is the biggest thing that each player can do? Because when these games do get bogged down and go long, that's going to be the deciding factor. So Curtis, who has the more traditional build, has access to Emrakul, the Promised End. This is a techie way to go over the top in these 4-color mirror matches. Matt does not have Emrakul. Instead, the best thing that he can do is probably use Karn to go for Sundering Titan. So let's keep an eye on those two plays, and if we get that deep into the game where stuff like that is mattering, who can achieve their most powerful line of play first is going to be a huge determining factor.
Absolutely. Man, Sundering Titan, Emrakul the Promised End, Karn Wishboard. This is not yesteryear's Modern anymore.
No, not at all. Yeah, I mean, we saw the first game kind of dictated by the Lord of the Rings cards, Delighted Halfling into the One Ring. But yeah, I mean, these decks are kind of like all Modern Horizons, all of these straight to modern, super powerful cards and sets, plus Omnath, which is great because it's one of the most powerful things you can do when your colored mana requirements are not holding you back. And then also Omnath is great because it pitches to every different elemental, every different force that you can think of.
I don't want to focus too much on mistakes, but Chad has been talking about a Windswept Heath that was used to fetch a Steam Vents. Neither player caught it. The floor judge is watching 2 matches. It's entirely possible it didn't actually matter, given that Matt had a full grip of cards. He might have had a different land to fetch for the Steam Vents. Regardless, it's just it would have been a warning and a rewind had they actually caught it in time. So,
speaking from experience, that's just such an easy mistake to make with these types of decks because for the most part, you think of a fetch land as giving you access to any color of mana that you need, and the decks are so complicated to pilot. You spend so much mental energy thinking like, well, what land do I want on the battlefield? What order do I want to play my lands? How do I want to sequence? And then sometimes when you get so caught up in those thoughts, you lose track of a detail like, oh, actually, Windswept Heath and Steam Vents don't match up.
Yeah. Yeah, the 4 and 5 color decks, it's planning ahead, and sometimes you skip a step. Back to the game. We're going to go to the second game here. Matt Shu up 1. Resolving some mulligans now.
Yeah, the good news for Curtis is that even though you're down a game, you get to go first in the second one, and Matt is the one taking a mulligan. So if Curtis is able to have a good start with some of these planeswalkers, I see Ren and 6 ready to go, and put him in the driver's seat.
Yeah. I suppose one of the nice things about this particular matchup is that even if opponent does lead on Delighted Halfling and you don't want to, say, spend mana to kill a creature, there's Solitude, Subtlety, and Fury, right?
Right, yeah, and that's what we saw out of Curtis the previous game is using Fury just a 1-for-1 trade against Ren and 6, and that stuff definitely comes up.
Yeah. Chat user says, how many rounds we're going to see today? This is round 4 of 8. There'll be 5 rounds and a top 8 tomorrow.
Yep, like so eight rounds total both days, and we're bringing you every second of it. We'll be here.
Absolutely. Excited to have you today. We're going to have you for the top 8 tomorrow, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Looks like some mulligans going on Matt's side. And Curtis has kept a 7. I love these hand cams. The last time I worked with Anz at MTG here, we didn't have hand cams. We were just guessing.
Yeah, the production quality has, I mean, Anurag is just leveling up every single event that he does, but this is really awesome. As somebody who's been, you know, in multiple spots in these tournament broadcast setups, I just really appreciate this, like being able to call for the deck lists is amazing. Getting to see the players' hands is amazing. It's all luxury. Like just getting a camera on the game in any form is really special thing. And then all of these extra quality of life improvements, I'm just loving it.
Absolutely. All right, this is a mold of 5. Matt's keeping this 5. It has lands and spells. There's the preordain we were talking about.
So the best thing that can happen when you multi 5 with a deck like this is that you're able to stick Ren and 6, because once Ren and 6 is on the battlefield, getting you a fetch land back every single turn, your total number of resources is not really restricting you anymore, because you can make your land drop every turn, and then all that matters is really having a spell to cast in your hand. So I would not consider it a death sentence for Matt to have mulligan to 5. But that said, he's going to have the right selection of cards if he's going to be able to come back and operate at full potential.
Absolutely. Going to turn 2 for Curtis Lamb. He's got a Triome and a Temple Garden in play. He's shocked in this Temple Garden, so we're looking to Ren and 6 right now. Pretty clever of Wizards to put a second toughness point on that Delighted Halfling.
Yeah, for sure. It's kind of an interesting, like, reminds me of a dog chasing its own tail, where it's like, all right, we're going to make so many really, really powerful cards that deal 1 damage to creatures, but then we got to start making all the creatures have 2 toughness, so then, you know, what's next? Ren at 9, that's going to deal 2 damage to target creature when it -1s.
Oh, that's later this year. We'll see that later.
Yeah. Modern Horizons 3 coming next year.
There's Preordain, recently unbanned. That was unbanned this month. Matt's gonna look at 2, scry both to the bottom, and grab the random top card here.
Yeah, so you posed a good question, Brad, about how important is Preordain going to be. I think very important, because these 4-color decks, the potent when you can have the right answer line up against the right threat. Plus, we have now this post-board dynamic of, well, who can find their key card first? Who can set up their Emrakul or their Sundering Titan? And I do think having access to Preordain is going to give Matt an advantage in that department, even though it does cost you, some mana can sometimes throw off your curve or make you take 2 extra damage from a shock land. I think that's all worthwhile, at least when it comes to this matchup.
I'm glad you said that. These decks, and especially in modern, especially, just haven't had good card selection for a very long time. And with all these haymakers from Modern Horizons, from Lord of the Rings, I love it. Back to Matt Shu, where he's looking to plan out his turn 4. He's staring down Nissa. I believe that is Sage Animist? Which Nissa is that?
The Resurgent Animist? One of those Animists.
One of the Animists. She's an Animist for sure. Fetch land. I did see a 1 ring in Matt's hand. You think this is a good place to deploy it?
Yeah, so this is actually a great sequence for the 4-color deck, is to go the 1 ring, then the following turn you go Omnath, fetch land, and then have all this extra mana to play out the cool stuff you're drawing into with the 1 ring. So I would say that means turn 5 Omnath, but actually Matt has been ahead of schedule both of these games due to the Delighted Halfling.
Yeah. And that's exactly what happened. That is the 1 ring immediately tapped. So Matt's got a shields up for the turn. Back to Curtis Lamb for his 4th turn. Nissa needs to trigger twice to really get maximum value out of her.
Correct. So like Omnath, you're really looking to pair Nissa with your fetch land.
He's got at least 1 in his hand, thanks to that hand cam. See?
Hello there.
Options in this deck, Reed.
Yeah, tons of options. So it's in some ways, I envy these players getting to play with all these sweet cards and have all these great options, but also, being in the seat in a high pressure match is not easy.
Yeah, both are 3-0. It's 8 rounds today, 5 rounds of Swiss tomorrow. So you really need to end today with a high record if you're going to if you plan on playing in the top again.
Yeah, so I think the players are going for 6-2 to make day 2, but don't stop there because your record carries over. So if you can put yourself in an even better position in striking distance of top 8, that's just where you want to be.
Yep, absolutely. So we did deploy the Windswept Heath. Curtis has a lot of options. The dice is representing Nissa's triggers.
So there is Teferi bouncing the 1 ring. So just a real classic tempo play for Curtis, saying, hey, you can spend your 4 mana to replay the 1 ring, but it's going to take your whole turn. You're going to be set back to 0 burden counters. And now that I'm starting to pop off with my own Nissas and Omnaths, any extra window of time that I can buy myself, I'm going to use it really effectively.
That's pretty interesting dynamic, in my opinion. It's because by resetting the ring, it does force Matt to cast it, but there's the protection shield. So basically, they're both just delaying the game, right? Is that what's happening right now?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. But I would say that delaying the game is favorable for Curtis, at least the way the board looks right now. Now we know Matt has a potentially very powerful option available to him in Omnath plus Fetchland plus the 1 ring. But Curtis actually took that away by bouncing the 1 ring and killing the halfling. Now Matt's going to have to spend a full turn trying to get back to where he was a second ago. And Curtis is going to capitalize on that window.
Yep. While we were chatting, we resolved Mrs. Trigger. A Solitude went to Curtis's hand, and then a Prismatic Ending fired off on the Delighted Halfling. Back over to Matt. Headed to his 4th turn.
So the known Solitude is big because Solitude can answer Omnath at instant speed, which kind of means throwing a wrench in the plans when it comes to Matt's perspective. So if you go for a big turn where you're going to play Omnath and a fetch land and try to re-up that mana that you invested. If Solitude answers Omnath somewhere in the middle, it could be really bad for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Misty Rainforest for Matt immediately pops it. That means we're not going to Omnath this turn, I think. Maybe. We do know he has a 1 ring in hand, and he might just do that to buy a full turn, right? Let's see. That's a forest and a plains if you don't recognize those basics on the left.
Yeah, so it feels like a little bit of a tough one for Matt, playing the Omnath and not getting the mana rebate, and knowing that it's very likely to get answered by a Solitude. So, I mean, it's a strong play, and from the cards that we're looking at from the overhead cam, it looked pretty strong for Matt. But I predict that the board is going to look a lot worse for him by the time Curtis is done with this turn 5.
Yeah, Curtis is with the Teferi, with Anissa, with 5 or more mana. I just, the Omnath seemed like an underwhelming play from my perspective, but we'll see. I guess Matt's banking on wasting Curtis's turn. We'll see. Omnath for Curtis Lamb. Locus of Creation. Here's his 5th land. It's going to trigger both Nissa and Omnath. We get a free mana from Nissa, and from Omnath, the first trigger is 4 life. Now, the fetch land is going to resolve and presumably bring in a shock. Omnath will generate not quite Wooburg. Woo-erg.
Adding the mana from the Nissa, it's can be Wooburg up to 6
Good.
mana, 7 with the fetch land.
Boy, this is the kind of turn you play this deck for, right?
Yeah, most definitely. So Curtis kind of has his choice of, you can. The one thing that I think he really wants to do is kill the opposing Omnath to make sure that Matt can't have a similarly powerful turn. But he's going to start with Elesh Norn. Now he could see like a double Solitude, double Fury. Maybe we just see him pass the turn. Who knows?
That is wild. Elesh Norn, Mother of the Machines. It doubles all the ETBs from Curtis Lamb, and it shuts off all the ETBs from Matt Shue.
Yeah, so powerful. One thing that's great about Elesh Norn in this matchup is Solitude. Stopped dead in its tracks. Leyline Binding, stopped dead in its tracks. Prismatic Ending, well, okay, but that's a really expensive answer to the Elesh Norn. So this card kind of stands on its own as just being uniquely difficult to answer for the 4-color players, and in fact, like for anyone playing white-based removal.
Yeah, long gone are the days of Path to Exile. Let's see what Matt Shue can do for his 5th turn. It's time to check his sideboard. That's either a good sign or not a good sign. Let's see. Sideboard check. Can I answer Elesh Norn, Mother of the Machines? Misty Rainforest, lane number 5 for Matt. Modern the Shuffling. That's an island. Omnath will trigger. This is Omnath's 2nd trigger, so there's a gain of 4 life and gain of Woo-erg. That's going to lead with a Preordain. Put both to the bottom. Grab a random card. There's that 1 ring we saw earlier. But Elesh Norn shuts off the ETB, I believe. Yes, it does.
Yeah, good point. That would have been the only bit of good news for Matt. But if the protection ability was successfully shut off, then Curtis only needs to remove the Omnath and attack for 11, and this game's going to be over.
Oh, yeah, writing's on the wall, isn't it? Fury disposes of Omnath, exiling an Omnath for Curtis. And here is a lethal attack. All right, going to game 3. Curtis did something somewhat interesting in the first game where he conceded on like turn 5 when Matt basically got to do whatever he wanted and Curtis was behind by 3 or 4 cards. Do you think that was a consideration for time? Do these matches often go that long?
They definitely can. Yeah, they absolutely can. So I think that's actually good tournament strategy for Curtis. If you're like, well, I'm definitely going to lose this game no matter what, but it's going to take a long time for Matt to actually deal the killing blow, then sometimes you can make a strategic concession. You know, I don't often advocate conceding, you know, because you're discouraged or because you don't want to play anymore. But if you're doing it because you actually believe that it's improves your chance of finishing the round in time, that can be a totally justifiable reason.
Yeah, good move by Curtis. In case this third game takes a long time, he's perhaps given himself some extra time. There's deck list. Why don't you talk about it, Reed?
Yeah, so here is Matt's particular take on 4-color. We talked about Karn being the major innovation, so 3 copies of the One Ring in the main deck, plus the 4th that you can access with Karn. So Matt's just saying, I want to see this card as early and often as possible. Other than that, a lot of the common hits, you know, some removal spells, the Delighted Halfling, and then that recently unbanned Preordain. I guess just to even further improve your access to the One Ring. So I definitely like the streamlined version of this deck, and the Karn seems like it's has the potential to give an advantage in a matchup like this.
Yeah, and I'm sure it plays well in other places too, like maybe against the Tron matchup where you can fetch up artifacts to solve those problems too.
Sure.
Yeah. Let's see. Game 3, both of them going through their pregame procedure. Matt's tanking hard. Is that a 1-land hand?
Looks like both players kept on the strength of a turn 2 red and 6.
They did. All right. Turn 1 for Matt is just a Misty and a pass. Over to Curtis. Curtis says, I'll raise you. I'll see you. That's going to fetch end step. For Triumph. I think Matt's really banking on drawing some lands here.
Well, yeah, the good news about Ren and 6 is that can sort of be your way of making your land drops every turn. So
Yeah.
Matt banking on either drawing lands or just having the Ren and 6 stick, but we've seen Curtis willing to fight over this by using Fury, Leyline Binding, or Prismatic Ending could do the trick as well.
Yeah, a lot of answers. We ticked up Ren and 6, and not sure what's going on. It looks like there's a judge call. Misty Reinforce is picked up into Matt's hand. Curtis responded with fetching his Misty Reinforced.
Yeah, so we don't know what the judge was talking about. Chat had pointed out a couple of potential errors in previous games. So sometimes a judge will come up and say, like, oh, hey, it was brought to my attention that something went wrong last game, and just kind of address the issue in that way. Brad, as a judge or someone who has done a lot of judging in the past, what would you do if you knew about an error that had been committed, but it was kind of too late to correct it in the game?
It's a courtesy. It's walk over saying I was made aware of this thing. No penalty. Just clean up your play.
Okay, great.
Yeah, this isn't the Pro Tour, but at the same time, you want players to play as well as they can.
Yeah, no doubt. One thing about tournament Magic is like having things go wrong is kind of the expectation. Especially with decks as complicated as these with so many moving pieces. So you don't jump, you don't instantly reach for the like this person is cheating conclusion. You more just go like, well, let's try to make sure this doesn't happen, and
Yeah.
if there's a pattern or something particularly suspicious happening, then we delve a little deeper. But for the most part, this is just kind of the cost of playing a game as complex as Magic the Gathering.
Absolutely. So we saw Matt's Fury get eaten up by Curtis's Fury, exiling an Omnath. Curtis also landed his own Ren in 6. Matt has another Ren in 6. This is the Ren in 18 game.
Yeah, most definitely. So Curtis can't be too happy. He expended a lot of resources to trade with the first Ren and 6, which is sort of like a gambit of hoping that your opponent doesn't have another. But then when Matt plays the second, it's like, all right, well, I can't do this again with another copy of Fury. So now you've sort of won that skirmish, and you have your Planeswalker on the battlefield.
Yeah. This is nearly the true mirror match. We're seeing nearly the exact same board on both sides. Turn 4 for Matt Shu. How does this long game with Ren in 6 play out? Reed, what do you think? Like, what do you think the 2-3 turns from now? What's this game gonna look like?
Great question. So the Ren and 6, what they do is they ensure both players are going to hit all their land drops. So now we're going to have the players just slowly and steadily working towards the late game where they have a lot of mana. And then these are the cards that the game is going to start to center around, stuff like Omnath, stuff like Teferi, Time Raveler, eventually the Elementals kind of coming down and trading for one another. Um, but yeah, when both players have a lot of mana, it starts to be who can draw more cards, and then when both players have a lot of cards, it becomes B, who can spend their mana more efficiently or leverage that into a board presence advantage. So getting your triggered abilities off of Omnath to double spell on key turns, getting your pitch elementals to successfully line up against your opponent's permanents. That's really important.
We saw Matt deploy Omnath on his 4th, but Curtis is going to say, "I've got the One Ring." Both players with an active Ren in 6. Active Ren in 6 means a lot more with an Omnath on the field, doesn't it?
Yeah, that Omnath is really powerful. I think Curtis would have loved to have a Solitude, or alternatively, if he had known the way the game was going to play out, maybe keeping the Fury and saving that for the Omnath instead of the Ren and 6 would have served him better. But, of course, it's a lot of a guessing game, not knowing exactly what your opponent's going to play on each turn.
Sure. Matt Shu in the tank. All options available to him. He's got a grip of, I think, 6 cards. A lot of lines here. Floated Strand starts the turn. I like to do my tanking while I'm fetching.
Yeah, that's a good time efficient strategy.
Basic Plains from Innistrad. Presumably a trigger from Omnath.
Yep, with the Omnath mana, it's going to be Teferi, Time Raveler. We saw this play in a previous game of bouncing the One Ring. And worth noting, the One Ring gives you protection from everything, but your Planeswalkers are still fair game. So that Omnath can attack the Ren and 6 and knock some loyalty off of that one.
And that's Karn. This is the primary difference between the two deck lists. Matt has 4 copies of this Karn. and a Karn Wishboard. What's he going to go for first?
Well, if his deck is all about getting the One Ring, that's a pretty solid first target. Ah, he's actually going to go up with Teferi rather than bouncing the opposing One Ring. But that makes sense given the Karn to shut off the activated ability. So Matt certainly achieving One Ring advantage here.
Oh, yeah. Karn happens to also be a one-sided Stony Sounds. Incidentally. Going over to the 5th turn for Curtis. The player is going to be tanking on each of these turns. That we're in a complex board state. Curtis Lamb with a Renin 6 and a One Ring that doesn't work right now. Versus Matt with Omnath, Renin 6, Teferi, Time Raveler, and Karn. This is Karn, the Great Creator.
Yeah, Curtis really has his work cut out for him here. I mean, it feels like you have to start by answering the Omnath, but those Planeswalkers are all big problems as well.
Yeah, I don't really know how this will play out, but Curtis says Solitude, Hardcast. And Solitude's so good. All the pitch elementals are so good. Do you think there was a reason he played Solitude on his main phase versus, say, Draw Step?
Well, you have to do it main phase or not at all against the Teferi.
Oh,
but additional considerations would be not wanting to let the Omnath trigger, not walking into a counter spell. I also liked Curtis's play of -1 on the opposing Karn, because then if Matt is to -2 the Karn, it will die and free up your One Ring. But I think Matt is in such a commanding position that he has the luxury to just not even use Karn. I already have plenty that I can spend my mana on, and I'm happy enough just plussing all my Planeswalkers.
Yeah. All right, 6th turn for Matt. Omnath is gone, but Misty Rainforest remains.
Nice little action shot here. All those Planeswalkers looking great together.
That is not the Gatewatch. That is something else. Preordain. Matt gets a lot of selection over Curtis's deck. He's got the Preordains and the Karn, so he has a lot more decisions.
I'm pretty impressed by Matt in this match. He seems to just have, crisp, confident play. He knows exactly what his plan is, even in navigating these complicated boards. He seemed to be pretty sharp on the mulligan decisions too, knowing what it takes for an opening hand to leverage an advantage in this matchup.
Yeah. Yeah, I like his play too. But he has deployed the One Ring, clicked it up once. Let's see. He's ticked up his Planeswalkers. He's ticked up all of his Planeswalkers. And over to Curtis Lamb. Curtis's turn 6 starts off with Omnath, Locus of Creation. Do you think this Omnath can bring Curtis some to parity here?
Well, it's a great first step, and Curtis has to be thrilled that he dodged a possible Solitude here. But yeah, like Curtis is only getting back in this game if he can cast multiple relevant spells on each turn, and Omnath is the single best way to do that. So Omnath into Fury is something he might be looking for. Omnath into Teferi. If he could somehow stick Elish Norn, Mother of Machines, that would be a way for him to claw back into this. Yeah, that's great. That's very powerful here.
All right, so 2 triggers from Omnath. Then we're gonna get a third. Nah. But here's Fury.
Yeah, now the One Ring is freed up, so suddenly the board looking a lot more even. Though if you've been paying attention in this matchup, you notice that with each passing turn, the board state tends to change a lot in favor of whoever's turn it is. So it's like each turn, Curtis battles back to roughly parity, but then Matt gets to take a turn, spend all this mana, do all these powerful things, and then suddenly it looks like Matt's in the driver's seat again. But credit where credit is due. This is how it needs to start for Curtis if he's going to battle back into this game.
Good points, good points. Matt Shu on turn 7. Gonna click up the One Ring, put a burden counter. Draw a couple. He's got approximately 37 cards in hand. On low latency mode.
What we have not seen yet is planeswalkers getting attacked by creatures, mostly because the creatures tend to only stick around on the battlefield for one turn before they're pretty quickly dealt with. But if we do get to that point where Matt has to go like, oh man, I have no answer to the Omnath, then that's a meaningful change in the texture and the tempo of the game.
We don't have a clear favorite yet, but who do you like for this game?
I gotta pick Matt just because Matt is the person who's taking their turn right now. Got all this untapped mana, all these cards in your hand, roughly 37 to borrow your words, Brad. And I just think he's gonna be able to leverage this into something that puts him back into a favorable position. Now I don't know exactly what that's gonna be. I do think his priority should be answering the opposing Omnath, but he has all kind of the world is his oyster here. We talked about how this can become just a real slog, and you pointed out Curtis with the quick concession in game number 1. That's just good for both players because now they're playing this heated game number 3 with actually a reasonable chance of finishing in time. And just from a big picture tournament strategy standpoint, it's better for everyone when your matches reach a natural conclusion with one winner and one loser.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't want to draw this early in the tournament, that's for sure.
Yeah, certainly not.
All right. Matt Shu tanked into another Karn, the Great Creator, and immediately goes to the sideboard for Haywire Might.
All right, is he going to use the Might immediately, or might as well let Curtis untap and take some damage because that One Ring is shut down? But that's a really telling turn for Matt because he played Karn, which in theory should shut down the One Ring, but he's taking such great pains to not let Curtis have an unanswered One Ring that he's doubling up on answers. So he's saying, I want this Haywire Might because I'm prepared for my Karn to get killed and I want to have the backup answer to your One Ring. But Curtis able to untap with not just Omnath, but 2 creatures, which can now attack the opposing planeswalkers, give him tons of mana, and suddenly I'm rethinking my previous claim. I think actually Curtis has a really good chance of making something happen in this game.
Yeah, I asked you to make a prediction, but boy, is this match unpredictable, huh? there's a lot going on every turn.
And Curtis, I saw in his hand that extra special sideboard card, Emrakul, the Promised End. It's here for this matchup, Brad, to go over the top in these games that are just total slogs, and both players have tons of cards, tons of mana.
Yeah, and Matt doesn't have any sort of good answer to that line, does he?
Yeah, the one thing that can protect you against Emrakul is the protection turn from the One Ring, but that is not the world we're living in this turn. So if Curtis just wants to spend a ton of mana, play the Emrakul, and then try to decimate Matt in whatever form that takes, then we're going to see some fireworks.
Yeah, Curtis likes 4-color Omnath so much he wants to play both decks. We're doing a graveyard check, so I think that's what we're going to see right now.
Yep, so 4 from the Omnath, 3 or 4 from the graveyard, and then the remainder coming from tapping lands. And
There
we
it
have
is.
Emrakul, the Promised End. So it's been a while since I've covered an Emrakul turn, but this is going to be fun to watch. So the goal for Curtis is to play the worst magic he possibly can when he untaps for Matt's turn. So let's suicide attack those creatures. Let's use the planeswalkers in the way that generates the least value and takes off the most loyalty. Let's spew off cards in hand. You know, possibly even find other ways to do more damage.
Yeah, this is fun. Fun is the right word. I was playing with this card in Standard, and it was a blast. Not so much fun for Matt, but Curtis is going to have a good time. Here's that attack you were mentioning. It looks like they're both headed towards Planeswalkers. Matt's deciding whether or not he wants to throw away some blockers.
So if I had to guess here, I would predict that Matt is asking about what happens with Karn's wish ability when the opponent is controlling your turn. Do you happen to know the answer to that, Brad? If I'm controlling your turn and I'm -2 your Karn, do I get to look at your sideboard?
You don't.
Can I pick like playing Go Fish and just guess at a card that I think might be an artifact?
That is a good question. I'd have to check my official judge rulebook here, but and I can look into that for you. But off the top, I actually don't know if you can just grab a random card. So the tricky thing is that you can activate the Karn if Curtis takes control of Matt's turn. He can activate the Karn for the -2 ability, but he cannot see the cards. But he knows that there are cards in the sideboard. That's that is a super curious question. I'm gonna look into that. Why don't you take over the play for a second?
All right, so we have we're still in Curtis's turn. So we're talking about all this excitement with the Emrakul turn. We're not there yet. Curtis is attacking Planeswalkers. Matt has blocked both creatures and is sacrificing Haywire Might to exile Curtis's One Ring. So Matt is like, you know what? I'm gonna lose most of my board probably from this Emrakul turn, but I'm still fighting the good fight. So I wanna damage Curtis and put myself in a position where maybe I can rebuild once the Emrakul turn is done and over with. And an interesting question with the Emrakul turn impending is like, are these planeswalkers a positive or a negative to have on the battlefield? The Ren and 6 can ping my own stuff when it's under Curtis's control, but it's still probably a net positive to have on the battlefield. This stuff is really, really difficult to predict. So we're gonna finish Curtis's turn, and now we're going to the first of Matt's 2 turns. This one is controlled by Curtis, and let's see how much damage he can do.
This should be a blast, but real quick, I did look it up, and Curtis does not have access to Matt's sideboard.
So if you were to use the -2 ability, it's just no effect on the game.
Nothing. Just nothing. You lose the loyalty, which is, I guess, a good thing. All right.
Yeah. So yeah. I mean, let's just talk through some options. Not predicting necessarily what's going to happen, but Curtis is thinking about, I want to eliminate these planeswalkers off the battlefield. So you can definitely -2 the Karn and get nothing. You can use the Ren to ping the other planeswalkers. You can cast more Rens from hand to legend rule them. Something else to think about is, well, I have this 13/13 Emrakul. Do I want to protect this on the battlefield? And Teferi Time Raveler can bounce Emrakul. Now, that's, of course, a double-edged sword, so there's a lot to think about here, but Curtis could decide that he wants to spend this turn kind of neutralizing all the Teferis, just legend ruling them away, taking off their loyalty, whatever it might be. Or he could think exactly the opposite. Like, I actually want to bounce Emrakul so that I can have another shot to do this whole thing over again.
Yeah, that is. The world is his oyster right now. Let's see what he's actually going to do. It looks like he ticked up Teferi.
He played a new Teferi
Oh,
and has not
yes.
used the new one yet. So he
Excuse
could
me.
decide to -3 on nothing. He could decide to just Legend Rule again, which that's going to be his pick. You know, he could bounce. He could also bounce Matt's One Ring, though the One Ring is another card that has enters a battlefield trigger. So who knows if that's going to be worthwhile.
Funny, I've seen some pretty devastating Emrakuls in my day, and I'm sure you have too. But this one actually looks like it's not going to be that bad.
Wow, so Curtis did decide to minus the Teferi and put the Emrakul back in hand.
Okay, that was brilliant. Brilliant.
So I think he used the Ren and 6 already. I'm not sure what he chose to do with it. I would have been looking at the Ren and 6 finishing off either the weakened Karn or the weakened Teferi. And then, you know, keep in mind for those watching at home that even for how terrible this looks for Matt, like so much damage, so many resources being just incinerated, Matt gets a full turn after this. So
Right.
if he gets to untap and use some of these planeswalkers and have this One Ring, I mean, who knows? He does know that there's another Emrakul potentially coming to devastate him again, but this game is so complex that I'm not willing to call a winner yet. Even though that was such a great sequence for Curtis.
Yeah, Emrakul looks so good, but we're gonna go to Matt's turn. We got to be getting close to time now. Matt draws 3 cards off of the One Ring. Thank you. Approximately 5 minutes left. That counts their extension.
So there you see Matt picked up another copy of the One Ring. He could not cast that fast enough because he knows that that's his one way to protect against the Emrakul in hand.
Those cards that are face up in front of Matt are his hand. He's leaving them up as a courtesy for Curtis, since Curtis knows what they are.
Matt has created a 4/4 indestructible blocker with the Karn. Now the downside of that is his one ring is going to have summoning sickness, so he can't tap that to draw a card anymore.
Tick up on the Ren and 6 plus a lightning bolt finishes off Curtis's Omnath. Curtis now just with a Fury has Emrakul the Promised Land in hand, but won't get maximum value out of it, given that the One Ring was cast by Matt Shu this turn.
Yeah, so I mean, you could play Emrakul if you just want to have a 13/13 and not worry about the trigger. That is something that is legal. Probably not going to be the best play you have access to. Oh boy, Elish Norn, very powerful.
Indeed, Elish Norn coming out for Curtis. We're winding down on time. Man, this has been a crazy game. I love it. This has been great.
Here's double Leyline Binding. Now you could choose to go after the One Ring, which frees up Fury to attack an opposing planeswalker.
And that looks like that's what he's doing. We went after Karn the Great Creator and the One Ring. That leaves Ren and 6 and a Teferi Time Raveler on the battlefield, but one of them will probably die to this Fury. And it's Teferi. Boy, this you were right earlier. Everything changes drastically between turns.
Yeah. This game has been sick. I mean, quite a far cry from game number 1 that was conceded on turn 4. This is like both players have just spent so much mana, drawn so many cards, devastated each other over and over again.
Cycling a Triumph on Curtis's turn for Matt Shu. Matt goes untap for turn number, who knows, probably 8 or 9. We'll see.
So if Curtis had Elish Norn all along, that makes a lot of sense with his his priority being to deplete the Teferi Time Ravelers, because that is one of the few good answers to Elish Norn. Now Matt's going to have a really hard time answering the 4/7 creature because Leyline Binding and Solitude are shut off. So you got to get creative if you want to get that Elish Norn off the battlefield.
Boy, Elish Norn, so good in this deck. Matt
Yeah,
Shea
Elish Norn is really impressive.
starts off with the Preordain. This is his third one for this game, I believe. He's still debating on what to do with those cards while he analyzes his hand. His hand's kind of all over the place because Curtis knows those cards. We're going to leave one on top, one on the bottom. Draw that card, which I, not 100%, but I think that was the One Ring. Organizing our mana, that's got to be a difficult task with this deck.
No kidding. And so don't forget about the known Emrakul in Curtis's hand. Curtis orchestrated the situation by purposely bouncing his own Emrakul. And now Matt, if his turn involves anything other than casting the One Ring, he knows that is a threat, that Emrakul can Mindslave for him the following turn.
Yeah. Absolutely. Renin 6s and Karn are actually part of Matt's hand, just a refresher. And I think Matt's going to look at doing... Let's see. Ring doesn't have
and a nice point out from chat that even the One Ring would not do it because Elish Norn shuts that off.
And you talked earlier about how difficult Elish Norn is to answer. Matt clearly doesn't have an answer, otherwise we wouldn't be going through this sequence of Renin 6s. It was a bunch of Renin 6s pinging Fury to finish it off.
Yeah, that's a tough way to do it, but you do what you have to.
That is an expensive removal spell. 3 Renin 6s, that's like $180 to kill a Fury, I think.
Are you able to identify that card that Matt chose off of his Karn? I think it may have been Ensnaring Bridge.
That's a solid answer to... This is that dice there in the middle of the table is indicating extra turns, so we are in turn 1 of 5.
Yeah, so you would think Curtis will have enough opportunity to get the game over with, but it's not trivial. And then I also want to point out that Emrakul has an unusual outcome when it's played in extra turns, which is that it's just 5 extra turns total, regardless of who plays those turns, regardless of who controls them. So if Curtis plays Elish Norn, plays Emrakul, he'll take Matt's turn, and then Matt will get a turn, and it will be turn 4 by the time Curtis gets to play again.
Yeah.
So
and that would be Curtis's final turn.
Correct.
Yeah.
So
it's really
Curtis
interesting.
gets one turn fewer if he does decide to cast Emrakul.
It's like what a weird. That's a monkey's paw gift. Is what that is. Prismatic Ending takes care of Karn. Still turn 1. Matt's gonna flash in Solitude.
Yeah, so keep in mind that enters battlefield trigger is shut off by Elish Norn.
It's inevitable that both players slow down a little bit once they're in turns. think we're going to be looking at a draw. What do you think, Reed?
Well, that does seem to be like the best outcome that Matt can hope for. There you see him chump blocking Elishnorn, which is not really a play that you would make if you're trying to win, but it does make it trickier for Curtis to win the game in the allotted amount of time.
Turn 2, Matt Shue deploys Flooded Strand. Has an Ensnaring Bridge in hand. Lighted Halfling is his lead play. Not quite as impressive on turn 11. Karn the Great Creator. It's the alternate Japanese art.
And here we have Matt sitting behind an Ensnaring Bridge. And Curtis gets, in theory, 2 more turns to try to fight through this bridge, find an answer, win the game. He can play Emrakul, but that will mean not getting another turn to attack with. It will also mean, we already talked about how you can't -2 to get a card for on your opponent's behalf when you're controlling their turn. But that's very powerful. The Leyline Binding is exactly what Curtis needed, and by doubling that ability with Elishnorn, he's able to answer the bridge and then some.
That's brutal. Maybe we will see a conclusion to this match. Curtis Lamb takes the 3rd turn of extra turns. Matt just with Delighted Halfling and a Ren and 6 on 2. We're doing an Emrakul check, I think. You think Matt and Curtis know how the extra turn rules work with Emrakul? Promised it.
I'm guessing that Curtis is going to ask. But yeah, this is a major inconvenience for Curtis, because he would love to be able to Emrakul the opponent and then get one last turn when the dust settles to attack with the 13/13 flying, but that's just not in the cards for him based on the time situation.
Right. All right.
And
Curtis
yeah, the triggered ability on Emrakul is not optional for those wondering. You must take an extra turn for your opponent.
Yep, it's not a May, and it's a cast trigger, so you don't get to double it from Elishnorn. All right, Curtis found a line. What are we doing, Curtis? We are starting off with a 1 ring. Pick it up. Draw a card. The 1 ring plus Elishnorn. That's interesting.
All right, so Solitude clears out the blocker, does gain Matt 1 life, but in theory, well, this Engineered Explosives is actually pretty meaningful here. I'm guessing that Matt has a black producing land, in which case he can Explosives for 5. Yep, there's the Indatha Triome.
Turn 4 of extra turns. Matt's playing for the draw here. X equals 5 on this Engineering Explosives, and now Matt is cardless.
Yeah, so it seems like the outcome is going to be a draw, because Curtis can't win the game through that Engineered Explosives. He can deploy Emrakul, but that's it. There's no more opportunity to play the game.
Yeah. Take an extra turn that doesn't exist.
So it's going to be a disappointing result if you're, a Curtis fan here, as it looks like, given an unlimited amount of time to play, Curtis would have won. But those aren't the tournament rules. The tournament rules are that you have to complete the match in 50 minutes, and even though Curtis put a good effort into doing that, he was not quite able to. So the result is going to be a draw, both players going to a 3-0-1 record. Certainly nothing to sneeze at. I mean, that'll put them in a decent position if they can repeat the process for the second half of day 1 here. But yeah, this is something that is very meaningful in tournament Magic. Is if you can't finish in time and you take a draw, that can really wind up impacting your prospects of making a day 2 or a top 8 finish.
Absolutely. We'll be back soon. We're going to take a short break, but we will be right back with the 5th round.